Hello, Internet. I just wanted to do a quick video because I did the haul thing yesterday, and I've had the time since to read through Spider Man, and I just know there's nothing else that I'd really want to talk about as much this month. There's some interesting things. I've read a few other issues. Um, Nothing super noteworthy in Turtles. Ant was actually interesting, and if I could get it for less than the cover price of like $5 an issue, I'd probably continue it, but yeah, we'll see. So, I don't know. First up was 875 or 74 of Amazing Spider-Man, Spencer's Last. This issue was hilarious. Um, After I'm gonna say about 80 issues of Spencer's run. I know it's 74, but there were like one-offs tucked in there so they could get through it sooner. Because the art team changed, but it was actually literally like bookends or middle issues to arcs that were happening. It was stupid. Um, this issue, after all of that, didn't really have much to do with that run outside of the last kind of arc kind of building to a few points for what had been happening. So the mystery of Kindred had been throughout the entire series, but outside of Kindred existed for the first half, Peter didn't even know about Kindred. And then some of the machinations of what had happened, and then going forward, some of the other things were Kindred. We find out Kindred's really two characters that were the demon resurrections of the supposed offspring of Osborn and Gwen Stacy, but now there's a demonic component, so whether or not they're actually kids, I don't know if that's true or if that's just the devil's machinations or if it matters and they're kids and he's just resurrecting them all the time. Um, it seems like a moot, stupid point. Um, and so in order to understand this issue, you'd need to have read some of the previous Spencer stuff, though honestly not most of it. Um, More importantly, you would need to read Spectacular Spider-Man 200 with the death of Harry Osborn, and I think a couple other issues leading up to that in JMD's run. Um, yeah. You would also need to have read the two most loathed arcs in possibly superhero comics and certainly of Spider-Man's lore outside of Trouble, which would be One More Day and Sins Past. And also, arguably, the Sins Past sequel that happened in a B book that I'm just spacing on the name of, Sins something. But the ones with Gabrielle and the guy's name, sorry, too many dumb characters that we as a Spider-Man general community have all agreed to move on to and forget. So the crux of everything that Spencer's doing is based on everything that people who enjoy Spider-Man have liked the least throughout all of the years, and that's what he wanted to put his mark on. It's stupid from a writer's perspective, but going from that and understanding that and kind of understanding the appeal of that, like, what if I can take, the most loathed but like certainly talked about Spider-Man stories of all time and twist them into something more important but also more engaging, kind of lifting the entire mythos with it. It'd be a hell of a trick to pull off. It's not. Uh, so you'd need all that background. Um, so so what Spencer's doing is he's trying to take the idea that Harry Osborn had died in Spectacular Spider-Man 200 and a lot of the continuity that followed that, and what he wanted to do was then say that was true and move it forward and kind of get over the mystical and unexplained, but who cared, rebirth of this new Harry Osborn. Which means, in the process of doing this prior, he made Norman Osborn sane and kind of like trying to repent for his sins. So he's kind of sullied the return of Norman Osborn, which GMD also wrote as a continuation of Spectacular 200 later in the Spectacular run, 75 issues later. And then he's also really confusing a lot of what has happened to Harry in the last decade, along with a few other things with Norman. Um, so so American Son, which plays on the father-son relationship between the Osborns in a big way at like the global scale of the Marvel universe being at impact. That story is now more confusing than it was. Um, a lot of what happened with Osborn because he started playing with mysticism, not only recently with that like one Dan Slott issue, Coda, before he left, but was about the only thing he did with Norman Osborn outside of the Red Carnage thing, though also that. But also the Gathering of Five and all that mysticism is also suspect because Norman Osborn had already sold his son's soul to the devil. So he's already playing with mysticism. So a lot of this coming into it new and not being like a Doctor Doom character and not doing this. Really, Osborn's moving a lot closer to Doctor Doom in a lot of respects, but without anything that would make it more compelling. But also, so this story is messing up 2.5 decades of continuity at this point, reaching back, playing with it, but not addressing any of that, only playing with Spectacular 200 and then these two hated ones from wherever, but just forgetting everything else that happened and the consequences of what you're saying that. So I bring up the mysticism point with Norman Osborn because that's been played on so many times, and having this hanging over that should affect it because magic has rules, or at least loosely held rules about connections, names, and power. And if you're in allegiance with the devil, that affects all of that inherently. So that's a problem. And then Harry Osborn not being Harry Osborn, but like a clone, but also, again, tied to demons, makes that more fretful. Also, that makes One More Day more fretful because then you're leaning on Osborn having all of that going while Peter's here, but because there's, you'd argue their souls are entwined, as is argued in this issue. Um, that raises the stakes on that as well and makes it make less sense and seems like Peter should have more repercussions at this point, but it's basically making the devil out to be Harry Osborn's nemesis as per his birth because Norman Osborn sold Harry's soul to the devil, which is a whole Doctor Strange plot. Doctor Strange is in here in a very weird way. Um and then gone. I don't know. The problem is I'm struggling to talk about this because it wasn't thought through. The story doesn't make sense in a grander scale. And when it's all said and done, Spencer didn't even play true to his story. The one clever thing he did is by making Kindred these two characters, there was some gender confusion and details that really threw off the mystery as we were going. That could have been a satisfying conclusion, but because he made everything metaphysical and ultimately not Kindred not matter as a character, I don't know where Kindred stands after this is done. I don't know where Harry, well, I know they killed Harry again after resurrecting him for real, I guess technically only a few issues ago, which was a mystery about these two Harrys, which is really unsatisfying. And after it's all said and done, it's like, does it matter? And then MJ and Peter are together in lieu of One More Day, but that's not resolved at all. Which was what everybody was wanting this effectively to do. Or not wanting, but expecting. And it didn't do that. So cohesively, this didn't work. Playing as continuity, clearing anything up didn't work. Solving your own mystery didn't work. Being intriguing didn't work. It's such a failure. It's incredible. I can't believe this got past editorial. And that plays into the next era because I'm wondering if Nick Lowe, Spider Man editor for the modern era, seems to have felt this. And I say that because when we get to Spider Man 75 and then 76 and 77 as we continue, there's a essay he writes in the back. Maybe essay is the wrong word, but he has a big 2-page spread that he's just writing, talking about this, about how he's bringing people on board, and he wanted to write this really big but tight Spider-Man story. So apparently he got this team together with Wells and Gleason and Thompson and Bocelli, so like all these artists and writers, and they were going to write an 18-issue arc, which I think is a great idea. And having this community project, I also think is a great idea. It turns out it went to 19 issues. And whatever. I don't. Here's the thing. I don't necessarily care about numbering in that certain issues or big issues fall on a centennial or 75. Marvel very much does. I actually kind of preferred it when big issues could happen when they were supposed to for the story. So you'd get like 243 and that's not a big issue, but like it didn't matter. The introduction of Carnage was a big issue. It wasn't some, on a 5 number. It's interesting. So this starts on what they say is 75, but it's really 876, however they're counting it, because they can fudge it however they want. And yeah, so Nick Lowe's kind of put together the team to create a tight arc. And it's really cool. We get Ben Reilly back, and he's trying to not just repent for his sins. We've seen that a million times, but he's been offered the chance by Beyond Corporation to be kind of their corporate Spider-Man, who's effectively doing Spider-Man stuff. But that's going to go somewhere. And there's already some conflicts of interest, but he's beholden to them because without them, he wouldn't be able to do things. They brought his girlfriend out of jail. They're giving him the ability to have access to funds and teams and like data. So he's not patrolling the city. He goes where there are problems, but there's like, data all over. So it's actually a smarter way to go about it. I'm wondering if they're going to go down the data manipulation road. Kind of hoping they don't, because that was handled in Superior Spider-Man not that long ago, but we'll see. It's a prevalent concern in today's world, so they have a lot of ground by which to do so. But across these 3 issues, I've already seen a lot happen. I'm excited for Spider-Man again. And I'm going to go so far as to say, if you haven't and you're the occasional Spider-Man reader, probably jumping on for these is worth the while. It's going to be a tight run, so there's an ending planned that always leads to better comic stories on average. And there's a lot of threads going here. So all that with Ben that I was talking about. And then Peter has this moment where he's struggling with Ben and then he falls ill. And we're seeing that, and they're making a big deal about the dangers inside, which is going somewhere, and they're playing on some totemic stuff as well. And Aunt May is there, and Mary Jane's there. And there's reference to kind of what happened with Harry and that Peter needs to deal with that. And like counseling and psychology and the psychological weight of everything is playing a big part here as well, which is really interesting because we really haven't seen that in Spider-Man as a general theme since JMD Mateus, which led to a number of what many consider to be some of the best Spider-Man stories of all time. So it also just makes sense because Spider-Man deals with so much. Why wouldn't you lean in on that? Also, you have characters set up for, and they're playing with that. They have Dr. Kafka, and I just there's so much here that's already so great. There's so much happening in each issue. The only thing I haven't liked so far is that Morbius has been one of the villains, and I just don't particularly like Morbius, but I have nothing negative to say about it yet. I enjoyed it, so it's one of my favorite Morbius stories so far as well. After 3 years of fucking Spencer, this is such a breath of fresh air, and I don't know if I'm being objective about this because I'm saying this is great and I love this and I love this a lot. And what I'm trying to remember is like I like this story a lot thus far, and I also like this more than, yes, Spencer, but I'm liking this more than Nonstop Spider-Man. I'm liking this more than a couple other V books that have happened along the way. I'm liking this more than the whole Red Goblin thing. And as much as I did like most of Dan Slott's run, I was on board and enjoyed that stuff. I think this is playing above the belt. I'm not saying this is going to be the best thing ever. I'm not saying anything like that, but I think the pieces are in place for this being worth your while for 20-ish issues. And being a standout story with a character that a lot of people don't necessarily want to read everything on. And having read a buttload of Spider-Man, I feel like my barometer is a little stronger. And this is going to be a run that people will point back to years later, I believe. This is going to be something cool, is what I'm saying. And I'm excited about Spider-Man again, which is kind of an emotional thing for me. So I love that. And I love that this is going somewhere new, doing something interesting, but also playing within the bounds of Spider-Man, psychological stuff, balancing your time, dealing with sickness, dealing with those close to you, and not fighting the devil. It just doesn't work. So just thought I'd ramble for a bit, talk Spider-Man, and I hope y'all get something out of it. I will talk to you soon, and keep your eye out for Never Stay Dead because we're doing something cool there too.